Hello, I'm Jeff Fisher. Good afternoon and welcome to Social Media Basics. This is a webinar designed to help you prepare for the cyber security trade mission to the US. Now, in the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to cover a few important things for you, some essentials about social media and how you can use it, and some tips very specific to the trade mission. Now, if you have any questions, you can ask them at any time throughout the webinar. There's a Q&A function you'll see on your screen. If you ask a question, just type it in, fire it off to us. We'll get to those a little later in the webinar, and others won't be able to see your questions that you've asked. Now, let's kick off. I'd like to introduce P, who is the Chief of Ecosystem Development at AustCyber. Hello, P.
Thank you, Jeff, for the intro. Welcome to the AustCyber Social Media Essentials webinar. So my name is Prerana Mehta, but as Jeff mentioned, you're welcome to call me P. I work at AustCyber. AustCyber is the Australian Cybersecurity Growth Network. It is an independent, non-profit organisation that's established to support the growth of a vibrant and globally competitive Australian cybersecurity sector. So we're here for you. AustCyber today has partnered with CONTENTGROUP to help companies build their capability, in turn helping to grow the cyber industry in Australia. So the purpose of today's webinar is to, again, really focus on you, our AustCybers, to understand what we mean when we talk about social media, to provide you with a couple of tools to use social media effectively and to grow and promote you and your organisation, and how to maximise your presence at the RSA mission in the USA. So back to you, Jeff, to get things started.
Thanks, P. So let's move on to some of the essentials of social media. Introducing Rachel Lobley, a senior strategist at CONTENTGROUP, has been working very closely with AustCyber and associated companies over the past year. Welcome, Rachel. Social media, it's a pretty huge place. I know it's a broad statement, but it's a big place.
It sure is. Thank you very much, Jeff. Hello, everyone. And actually, to give you a bit of perspective on what a big place the internet is, let alone social media, here's a great diagram which was designed by Laurie Lewis that demonstrates just some of the things that happen on the internet in a minute. But don't worry, don't panic. In this webinar, I'm going to cut most of this back to just two main social media channels, and we're going to walk through some of the key steps you can take to make sure that your social media is set up for success. So the two channels we're going to talk about today are Twitter and LinkedIn, and I want to give you a few reasons why we've chosen those two channels and why you need both. They both have a number of different benefits and are suited to very different types of communication. So some of the benefits of Twitter, a huge potential audience, and they're highly interactive too. It's very, very easy to connect with people, with influencers, with people that you may have thought might be sort of inaccessible actually to you. You can communicate in a conversational way. It's a great way to build a network with influencers, and you can also do this by using hashtags, which allow you to really find your tribe, as it were. And Olivia will talk to you a little bit more about the hashtags to use for the mission itself in her section. LinkedIn is a little bit more slow moving, I suppose. It's certainly a professional network rather than necessarily so much social. It's got a very fast growing audience, and it's the perfect platform to build your brand credibility. It's a great platform for things like blogs, thought leadership, and content from founders or key members of staff within your organization. It's also crucial for your employer brand, which often gets forgotten when we talk about social media. If you've got prospective staff, new employees looking at your business, it's great to have a professional LinkedIn profile ready to go. And at the end of the day, the channels that we want to use are the ones that are best to talk with our audience. So I'm going to speak fairly broadly, and each organization will always have different audiences and different priorities. But as someone working in a cybersecurity organization, it's likely your audiences might look a little bit like this. So we've got influencers, which might be private funds or grants. We've got purchasers, which can go all the way from individual users to huge enterprise level agreements. We've got our influencers, and that might be ministerial or government. It might be media and journos. It might be key opinion leaders, such as, AustCyber within the industry. And then finally, we've got our internal staff and any prospective employees. So we want to use the channels and design an approach to social media that makes your brand look the best it can be in front of all of these audiences. For the technology sector, Twitter and LinkedIn are really the best place to start. And I want to prove it to you. I'm going to show you some of the key interests of the people who follow AustCyber on Twitter. This is according to Twitter Analytics, and don't worry, I have asked them about this in advance. So we've got tech news, science news, technology, government, all highly relevant to the activities of AustCyber, and of course dogs, because it's impossible to be on social media without an interest in some kind of animals. So as you can see, the right content on Twitter will attract a highly relevant audience, and it's the same for LinkedIn too. So once we've thought about our audience in some detail, it's a great place to start with setting some objectives. So these might be different depending on where your social media is at the moment and what you want to achieve with it. So some people want to use it to raise awareness of their brand. Some people want to use it to raise the profile of particular individuals within the organization. And an important question, particularly for brands or businesses that deal in software or products or platforms, is, are you going to use social media as a service desk or a help desk for your customers? Some brands do, some brands don't, and some actually choose to have two social media channels, one for sort of brand building and one for all of the help questions. So that's something to think about. When you're setting your objectives, it's individual to your business, but some ideas might be use social media to raise awareness of our brand amongst relevant audiences, or use LinkedIn to build the profile of our founder as a thought leader in the field of XYZ, whatever is relevant to you. So we have thought about our audiences and we've set our objectives. And what I want to show you now are some examples of the different types of posts you can use to actually achieve these objectives. And to do this, I'm going to refer to this pyramid, which is a Google model of content, actually, which is hero, hub, and hygiene. So to explain, hero content, these are the big moments, the milestones, the announcements, the videos, the big events, the launches. They don't come around all that often, but you're certainly expecting a high degree of engagement when they do. Make a big splash, really. Hub stuff. Now, this is what keeps your audience coming back for more. It's a kind of regular thing. And that might be anything from a weekly blog post, some thought leadership, a weekly podcast, or even just jumping on a weekly hashtag on a regular basis to make the most of a trending topic. And obviously that depends very much on your budget and your capacity. Finally, hygiene content. Weird word to use, but it will make sense. This is all of that admin stuff that sometimes social media is useful for. Could be things like staff announcements, recruitment calls. It could be, our office is shut down over this holiday season. It's not super fun. You might not get loads of engagement from it, but it's really, really important because it makes your audience know that they can count on you and your channels for all the information that they need. To kind of put this into reality, I suppose, I've drawn a few examples from our good friends over at AustCyber. So top left of your screen now, you can see a piece of hero content. This is a big launch of a new initiative, AustCyber Sessions. There's been a graphic design especially for it. It's an important piece of content. Do have a look at AustCyber Sessions if you haven't. And that's a real hero piece of content for them. The hub content you'll see on the top right of your screen. Now, this is drawing from the sector competitiveness plan, which has a huge amount of data and information, and they're creating regular and insightful content using those proprietary statistics and pieces of data and recycling the report, which is great. If you look at the bottom, you can see a post encouraging followers to sign up to a newsletter. This is a typical kind of hygiene post. It's not an announcement, but it's just a regular post raising some awareness. Now, we've been through the types of content. There are a few things that you might want to think about from more of an organizational perspective, I suppose, before you start posting across all of your channels. You might want to think and plan a content calendar, really, for the next few weeks or months to make sure that you can post consistently and effectively. A lot of people, including some of the really big brands when they first start out, have an Excel spreadsheet. And it basically lists the date, the post, the image, and any relevant links that you need. It means you've got something to post on a regular basis and that your account doesn't go quiet for a few days. It also gives you that oversight of what you're posting over a longer period, so you can check that you're doing a good mix of your hero, hub, and hygiene posts. It's kind of about scaling the approach, really, to the capacity that you have. It might be that posting with huge frequency just isn't really possible with your current resources, and that's totally fine. But what's important is to find a rhythm and a system of approvals that works for you. We would always recommend that there's one person who has the final say on posting across all of your channels. And this just keeps a consistent tone of voice and style of posts. We talked about how Twitter and LinkedIn are two different platforms with different purposes, but you don't want to look like two brands across each one. And there are tools out there that can help you. So it's probably worth, depending on what level of maturity your social media is at, checking out a few tools. Hootsuite is a great one. It helps you to schedule your social media posts in advance, so you haven't always got to be live tweeting, which I know can be easy to forget. Hootsuite's not too expensive. It's pretty intuitive, but there are loads of different tools out there, and it's worth digging into a bit of research to see what would work for your business and your budget. So now we've been through some different types of content, I just wanted to show you AustCyber's Twitter there on the left and LinkedIn on the right, because these are great examples of a couple of pages that have had all of the kind of basic setup done and complete. And it's really important to have all of this in place to make your page look really professional and slick. So you'll see the photos are there, the profile photo is there, there's a cover photo that's consistent across both channels, there's the location which is set up, there are hashtags which are set up, and all of this will make you firstly look professional and slick, but also easier to find for people who are interested in knowing more about your business. Next, I wanted to show you a couple of really successful posts. So I have gone out of the tech industry here, and not examples from AustCyber this time, but these are kind of profiles that would speak to a similar demographic to your audience. So we've got Bloomberg on the left. It's really short, snappy, and clear. They haven't used the whole word count of Twitter, but actually they don't need to. It's the image that's really arresting. It's really shareable. It tells a story. And I think this is a great piece of advice for cybersecurity brands, actually, which is think about the data and statistics that you have in-house that are proprietary to you, that are great nuggets of information. Think about how you can incorporate that into your social media. And think about how you can demonstrate them using something like an infographic or even just a kind of graphic tile of some description to really make that data come to life and make it super shareable, because that's what Bloomberg have done here. They've also made the most of what was at the time a trending hashtag, which was the State of the Union address, and they've shortened their link, which is just great hygiene. On the right is a LinkedIn post from The Economist, a really hard-hitting headline and focusing on the content, which is a compelling video. Now, I've suggested a whole load of stuff here, and it's likely that for different brands, some stuff will work better than others. And it's a really important thing to check your analytics. So on your screen now, you can see how to access analytics for Twitter and for LinkedIn. Now, these are great tools because they'll help you to see things like your top posts, what engagement you've had, what different follower numbers that you've had, and you can actually use the insights that you can gain from this to decide what to post in the future. So before I go, I will leave you with this, some really key principles for both of the channels. A lot of them actually cross over between the two, but I'll run through a few. Twitter, keep it short and punchy. I know that the character count has increased recently, but don't feel you need to fill it every time. Post as frequently as you can. Remember to retweet. So Twitter in particular is not always just a broadcast platform. It's really worth considering what your audience would like to hear rather than just what you would like to say. Think about how you can open conversations with other brands, journalists, opinion leaders, etc., and be conversational in your style. Always use a hashtag. And as I say, Olivia will run through a few of those with you in the next section. And if you can, please try and use imagery where possible. It might just be a stock photo that you can find. It might be something that you've had designed for you. It might be a snap that you've taken on your iPhone at a conference, but it's always worth it because posts with imagery attached to them always perform consistently better. Please also consider shortening your links. You can use Bitly, it's free, it's easy, it just shortens those links down, which helps you with your character count and also just tidies up the post. If I had to give you 2 tips that I think are really, really important, and they go across both platforms, it would be give your audience an action. Now, what I mean by that is make it super obvious how you want them to interact with your post. Give them something to do, give them a link to click where if they click it, the benefit's really clear, like they're signing up to an event or listening to a podcast or seeing a blog. Give them something really shareable that will make them seem clever if they retweet it. But always think about how your social media adds value to your audience. And finally, for both platforms, it's really to test and learn. Have a look at your analytics. You don't need to look at the whole, every single thing, but maybe just check out the top posts, top performing posts for the last month. See if you can spot any themes and build on that as you go. Social media moves so quickly, you can always afford to test stuff out. And I think there was only one thing on the LinkedIn that I wanted to mention, which is actually relevant for both in a way. Post when your audience is looking. So think about when they're online, particularly with things like LinkedIn. Think when you're online on LinkedIn. And I know Olivia will actually go through some specific time slots in her section when you should be thinking about posting, but it's always worth posting when your audience is going to be most engaged to maximize the effort it takes to be on social. And with that, I think I shall hand back to Jeff.
Thank you, Rachel. That's really good. And now you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, I couldn't write fast enough to capture all those good tips. We are going to be emailing in the next couple of days a bit of a brief of all of the key points from the webinar. So do relax. We'll put that in your inbox in the next day or two. If you do have any questions that have come out of what Rachel's talked about or anything that you might hear throughout the webinar, you can fire those off to us now. There's a Q&A box on your screen. Just type in your question and shoot it off to us. Rachel, you mentioned there about, potentially setting up profiles for an organisation's founder, and that's prompted a question around, is it worth setting up a profile for our founder ahead of the conference?
Good question. I think, yes, it certainly is. Particularly on LinkedIn, it's super important that founders, CEOs and key members of staff from companies all have a comprehensive and well-built, LinkedIn profile page from an employment perspective, also from networking perspective. I'm sure you'll be handing out business cards. People will be looking you up. So it's more than worth having that in place. I'd also recommend, there's no better time than now to think about getting your Twitter page up and going as a founder, because you know that while you're on the mission, there'll be loads of great opportunities for posting photos, content, interacting with other founders, other brands that you meet. So why not? I think now's a great time to get going with it.
Perfect time. And that's the perfect segue to Olivia Grandjean-Thompson, who's the Communication and Engagement Manager at AustCyber, who's going to take us through getting the very best out of social media and some very specific tips to the mission. So welcome, Liv.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having me. So my name's Olivia, and as I mentioned at the pre-briefing yesterday, I'm the key contact on the mission for all things communications and media. In this section of the webinar, I did want to provide very specific advice on social media tactics to employ during the cybersecurity trade mission to the US. So of course, the frequency that you post is very dependent on your resources and capacity that you have within your organization. But I do recommend that you do the following. So before, we want to make sure that you publish content on your own channels. This is to raise awareness of your participation. During the mission, we recommend that you publish images and video footage on your own channels for increased attention in using the appropriate hashtags and handles. We also recommend that you publish value-adding insights on your own channels after the mission. So this is really to sustain the momentum. So it could include things like articles, blogs, social media posts. But again, just wanted to really reinforce the before, during, and after is very important. So who will see your post during the mission? You should always keep your audience in mind when publishing on social media. You may wish to post to your audience more broadly, or you can target very specific groups. So in Australia, it's a good idea to keep in mind that your audience may include other Australian firms with market-ready cybersecurity solutions and services, as well as the broader Australian cybersecurity sector. So this includes investors, accelerators, and incubators. The federal government, so people like the Department of Home Affairs, DFAT, and other key government department agencies, as well as state governments, including their ministers, ministerial advisors, and key funding decision makers. We also have the C-suite industry executives, mainstream media, and of course, trade media. Internationally in the US, it's good to keep in mind that your audience may include potential customers and partners for your firm or company, cybersecurity companies seeking to partner and also expand internationally, C-suite industry executives, foreign government or defense cybersecurity professionals, as well as international media in the US and venture capital firms. So my recommendation is really to publish a mixture of both posts that target your audience more broadly, as well as really tailored posts for your specific audience key groups. During the mission, there are a few key messages that we're hoping that everybody can really embrace to really have an Australian collective voice. So ideally, all content that you publish during the mission should aim to incorporate these 4 things. We want to showcase Australia's world-class capabilities in the cybersecurity sector. We wish to promote Australia as a destination for cybersecurity investment in the Asia-Pacific region among the US and international companies and investors. We'd like to acknowledge and expand Australia's credibility as a cybersecurity partner, as well as educating other Australian cybersecurity companies about commercial opportunities overseas and increase their ability to compete in international markets. Ideally, you should really mix posts between thought leadership posts. So these ones really relate to the key communication goals mentioned above, and they could include things such as blogs, articles from your founder, and a few of the other things that Rachel mentioned earlier. We'd also like to mix it with event posts. So obviously you'll be attending a lot of events during the mission, but really make sure you think about why you've decided to attend the mission. So what are your key insights? What are your key takeaways? What have you learned from the event? And what are you going to apply? How is it going to aid your organization? Are you exhibiting at the RSA? So if you are, it would be really great if you could capture images of your stand to promote your organization. Also, I guess it's a really good thing to keep in mind. As one company delegate, you may have a smaller voice, but obviously as a collective, you can have a much larger voice and we can make a much bigger impact. So it's really important that we're all amplifying these 4 key messages when we are publishing online.
And each other.
Yes. There are several important social media accounts to follow while on the mission, and I do recommend that you go in there and you follow them before we actually depart. So we've got AustCyber's account, so we've got a Twitter account and a LinkedIn account. We've got AustTrade's account, so again they have Twitter and LinkedIn. And also I really recommend that you follow your fellow delegates. So we've got a list that we're compiling at the moment, and that has everyone's social media handles on there. So it is a working list, and I do encourage you, once we've sent it out, if yours is missing, to really add yours in there. But we will distribute that as part of our resource kit that goes out over the next couple of days. We also have some social media hashtags to use during the mission. So as you can see in the top left corner, we've created a branded hashtag, and we will put this in the resource kit. So it's AustCyber in USA 2019. And this is we've sent as part of the digital toolkit. There's also an industry accepted hashtag for identifying Australian cybersecurity growth, and that's AustCyber. You can see in the far right corner. We've also got some best local hashtags to enhance the messaging. So you may think of using hashtags such as cyber, cybersecurity, and game on. For anything relating to the Australian government's cybersecurity strategy, we recommend that you use CyberStrat Oz. Some really useful tips to implement and things that you should start really thinking about include the following. So frequency of posting. Make sure you think about when your audience is online. For example, are you targeting an Australian audience or are you targeting an audience in the US? So in Australia, the best times for publishing on Twitter and LinkedIn are generally between 8 to 9:30 a.m, 11 to 12:30 p.m, and 5 to 6:30 p.m. This really is the times when we've noticed that we've got maximum reach and engagement. The same times apply in the US, but obviously there's a bit of a time difference. So it's really good to keep this in mind. So for example, if you want to reach an Australian audience, if you're on the East Coast, if you post between 5 to 6:30 p.m, that actually the equivalent of the early morning in Australia. So you're going to captivate both audiences actually. For increased engagement, keep an eye on what posts are getting the most engagement throughout the mission and try to post more of these types of posts. So for example, if you post an image of yourself on the shop front at the RSA mission on the conference and you see that that's getting lots of likes and lots of retweets, make sure you post a few more of those photos. It really does come down to what Rachel said, and that was the test and learn approach. It's going to be different for every organisation. When retweeting, always try to write a personal comment to accompany the post, as this generally gains more engagement. When you're retweeting, also tag other delegates and companies. Feel free to use hashtags. I generally recommend that you use 2 hashtags, but again, this is not a limit, and certainly you can include more or less as you see fit. By including and tagging different companies, it is also really handy for them to know, because there are so many tweets going on throughout the mission, it will show up in their notifications. So this really gives them a way to alert them and know to retweet you back or share some of your posts. It's a good idea to repurpose your content. So when posting an update to one platform, think about posting the same message to other platforms. For example, you post something on Twitter, it may be shorter and snappier, but on LinkedIn, you can really put that thought leadership spin on things, and you definitely have a lot more characters to work with. Featuring visual content is always a good idea. So things that posts that feature photographs, video content, graphics of stats always perform the best on social media. You don't need to do this for every post by any means, but we do recommend that if you are able to take a quick snap on your phone, it definitely makes a difference. Finally, you need to make sure that your organisation is ready. People are not going to just be looking at your social media accounts. They will probably look up your website. So it's a really good idea to make sure it's up to date, it's got the correct branding. So just make sure that is up to date. But again, if you have any questions throughout the mission, I am the main contact. I'm very happy to help you while on the mission, or if you have anything beforehand, please email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. If not, I look forward to helping you then.
Hashtag good stuff, Liv. Let's get into a few questions, because I'm sure that's raised a few questions for people. And a reminder, if you want to shoot something through while we're chatting, you can use the Q&A box on your screen now. Perhaps this one for you, Rachel. Should I think about paying to promote posts on Twitter and LinkedIn?
A good question. Lots of brands do choose to promote posts across both channels, and it can be a really, really effective way of generating more engagement. My advice would be, it really depends on the level of maturity of your social media, where you are. If you're very, very new to the social media game, it's probably best just to start on an organic basis. So just post as you know, following some of the guidelines and ideas that we've given you today, because also that will actually help you to determine in the future, if you do want to boost posts, which posts are actually the best ones to choose to put some money behind. So I would really recommend that. I'd also recommend getting together, your profile with a sort of backlog, I suppose, of tweets and posts and information there before you start really driving lots and lots of traffic to it. So boosting posts, definitely a good idea, but it very much depends on where you are with your maturity and what your objectives are.
We've talked a bit about LinkedIn, and I know there's LinkedIn Premium. is that something people should consider straight away, or do you jump right in there, or do you not jump right in there? What's the best advice?
LinkedIn Premium, there is an option to do a free trial, and that would be my best advice, would be to give it a go. It's not super expensive, but it is a cost, and I think it depends how much you're using LinkedIn, and it depends what it's for. So when you set up LinkedIn Premium, you'll be asked for your kind of priorities, I suppose, while you're on LinkedIn, and that might be recruitment, or that might be more like sales, and they'll actually design a package according to what your objectives are. So before you enter into it, I guess, think about the objectives, think about why you're going to do it, and if you think the return on investment would be appropriate for your brand. There are lots and lots of features you do get from LinkedIn Premium that you can't get from normal LinkedIn, and it's probably worth giving the free trial a go. That'd be my advice.
From an analytics perspective, the LinkedIn Premium does give you extra benefits. But my recommendation, probably, if you're at the stage of just setting up your channels, you probably don't need it at this stage. Yeah.
There's one for you. Is there anything we're not allowed to post while on the mission?
Might hand over to P.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think this is one of those instances, particularly when you're on a mission, where you just need to be mindful and respectful. So absolutely, and I think we've all kind of said a couple of times that we are looking to put out a voice which is a collaborative, collective voice, because that certainly is stronger, particularly in the USA, where Australia is a small and competitive player. So I guess in that regard, just be really careful about what you are posting. You don't want to be putting anyone off. You certainly don't want to be getting any potential investors or customers offside, and you certainly don't want to be kind of taking any of your other fellow members on the mission offside as well.
Terrific. Is there too many things? Is there such a thing as too many posts? Rachel, maybe you want to jump in on that one first off, and then Liv?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think there can be. I think anyone can be forgiven during the test and learn phase of social media setup for sometimes not quite getting it right, and you'll really get a sense from the levels of engagement whether you're posting too much. I would say Twitter in particular, it moves so quickly that you can afford to post quite a lot, particularly during something like the mission where everyone will be active and tweeting and retweeting. LinkedIn is somewhere where you might want to take a slightly more considered approach and make sure that all the posts actually add value, I guess. If you're not saying something new, you're not adding value to the conversation, or you're not engaging with somebody for a purpose, then I guess you need to think about whether that extra tweet or post is really worth it.
Yeah, and I think if you're new and you haven't had a channel, or you haven't had many posts on your channel before, it's really good to kind of start with a couple a week and then build up as you go, just really depending on the engagement. But you do need to remember that Twitter and LinkedIn is not just a one-way platform. It is something that you need to monitor all of the comments and make sure you reply to those comments too, so you have a two-way conversation going.
Yeah, great advice.
Can I ask, Liv, and I've always been curious about this one, what about tagging? Are there any tag rules? Do we need to ask people before we tag them? And how many is too many tags?
So you really should only tag key players. So I would recommend on this mission to definitely be tagging AustCyber and AustTrade, definitely. And generally you would use like the hashtag rule, maybe 2 tags is a good amount of tags. Don't go too crazy, but again, test and learn approach is best.
Can I pick up on something you were talking about earlier about content, and ties back to Rachel's view of the Bloomberg infographic? How do you generate, this is a question I get a lot talking with businesses, about the ability to generate quality content regularly, and so to be having it come through the pipeline on a regular basis, but making sure it's quality. You talked about being able to pick up on snaps while on the mission, photos, etc. What's your suggestion around trying to generate regular quality content?
Yeah, so I guess at AustCyber, as an example, we really go with a kind of a 2-stream approach. So we do, I guess, kind of those live updates or events that we attend. So things like that are happening at the moment on the mission. We're snapping photographs and we're putting them up, but always making sure they tie back to a key message. They need to have some sort of thought leadership. They need to have a value-adding insight. And then on the other hand, we use the proactive stream. So they are looking at things like our sector competitiveness plan and pulling out key statistics and how are these statistics relating to our mission, for example. So we use our key publications and flagship documents and reports to make sure that we've always got quality content being published, which are also subsidized by kind of event updates and in like kind of live event commentary.
Yes, yes. So in many respects, people can almost pre-think about using the key messages, those 4 key messages you've got. They can think about how they're going to structure and the messages, and then find specific content to amplify around those messages.
Certainly. So as part of the digital resource kit that we will be distributing, there will be some social media tiles in there that were created specifically with the key messages on there. So I do recommend that people use a program like Hootsuite to pre-schedule some content, just in case, you know, you're busy on the mission, you may not have time to post on a consistent basis. So just really having those proactive social media posts being scheduled, going out to be amplified.
And Rachel, probably a question that I know gets asked a lot. What's the etiquette and the best way to perhaps reach out to people on LinkedIn? Is it just to go cold, or is it to write a monologue, or what is it?
It's a difficult one. I think always make the most of when you meet people in real life. So always jump on that opportunity after for example, you've attended a conference. Even if you haven't actually spoken to the person face to face, you've actually got a reason to contact them or be in touch. So, you know, I saw you presenting at this conference, I was really interested by XYZ, and I would love to open a conversation with you. Give them a little bit of context and a little bit of reason rather than completely cold. Of course, the other tactic is to make your content on LinkedIn so compelling and interesting that they reach out to you. So it can go both ways.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for those questions. Really appreciate them. I'd just like to throw in a little bit of information about Content Group, who are partnering with AustCyber for this webinar. Content Group is a content communication agency, and we help government and brands to essentially tell their stories through content, as we've been discussing today, whether it be through video, graphics, written content like blogs, or indeed social media. We develop communication strategies for brands and help with setting up social media, making videos, drafting blogs, the whole kit and caboodle. And we've worked with a number of cybersecurity brands, including AustCyber, and would be delighted to speak with you if you have anything you need, either pre the mission as a specific piece of advice, or more generally in the longer term. Rachel's details are on the screen right now. Please don't hesitate to reach out and get in touch at any stage if you'd like. Alrighty, something to do right now. Our 2 presenters from AustCyber, Olivia and Prerana, their email addresses are on screen right now. If you'd like to connect with them, you can email them, but as Liv mentioned, reach out and connect on LinkedIn. You have the perfect excuse. I heard you on the webinar. I'd like to connect with you if you haven't already done so, because they will be your important context for the mission, but also they will give you some really good, I suppose, leads on how to handle social media. I'd like to thank our presenters today, P, Olivia, Rachel. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for attending the webinar today. I hope you found it useful ahead of the big conference, and that you have an absolutely fantastic and very productive time on the US trade mission. Thanks very much, and have a great afternoon.